What would you do if you were told, first class isn't for people like you? While holding a valid ticket in your hand, imagine the sting of humiliation, not just from strangers, but from those sworn to serve you. This is the story of Celeste Warren, a black woman, a powerful CEO and major shareholder of the very airline that tried to erase her dignity mid-flight. Boarding a plane in casual clothes, Celeste didn't expect to face blatant racism disguised as policy. What happens when the woman denied her rightful seat is the same woman who holds the power to change everything? How does a quiet, composed leader turn personal injustice into a public reckoning? As the cabin falls silent, cameras roll, and social media ignites who will stand with her, who will fall, and what does it take to uproot the invisible? Systemic prejudices lurking at 30,000 feet. This is more than a flight. It's a battleground for justice, respect, and change. Will courage prevail? If you believe everyone deserves dignity, no matter their race or status, hit like, share this story, and subscribe now. Let's journey together through Celeste's fight for fairness in the skies. Celeste Warren pulled the brim of her Navy baseball cap a little lower as she stepped into the soft hum of Seattle International Airport. A calm rhythm moved through the terminal, broken only by the distant click of suitcase wheels and the announcements echoing above her. She moved quietly, dressed in a dark cardigan, plain jeans, and worn white sneakers, blending in like any other traveler. No entourage, no assistant, no briefcase screaming executive, just her and a first-class ticket to Miami. She didn't need to be recognized today. That was the point. Celeste had built a career by making calculated decisions, rising through boardrooms with her clear voice, her poise under fire, and her refusal to play by the expectations set for her. She was now the CEO of Liberty Air and one of its largest private shareholders. But titles didn't interest her nearly as much as truth did. And lately, the truth had become harder to find from behind glass doors and digital dashboards. Rumors had been swirling, passengers of color reporting incidents, quiet whispers of microaggressions, a few flagged complaints swept under compliance reports. Nothing public, nothing provable. But Celeste knew when something was festering behind the polished brand. She could feel it. So she booked this flight under her real name. She had chosen Liberty Air Flight 262 to Miami, a high-traffic route staffed with senior flight crew, the kind of crew that, if there was a pattern of discrimination, would show it without realizing someone important was watching. Celeste took a slow breath as she approached the first-class boarding lane. A gate agent smiled and scanned her ticket. Warren, Celeste, first class, seat 1A. Welcome aboard, he said. She nodded softly, thanked him, and stepped onto the jet bridge. Her heart beat steadily, but her mind was anything but still. 1,000 things had gone through her head that morning. What if it was all in her imagination? What if the crew were wonderful, professional, kind? What if she was wrong, but that was what integrity demanded? You don't act based on what you hope is true. You investigate what might be. The scent of lavender cleaner met her first as she crossed the aircraft threshold. The cabin lights glowed warm and soft. A gentle melody played over the speakers. First class was quiet. Rows of plush cream leather stretched out in front of her. And for a moment, Celeste allowed herself to admire it. She had worked for years to transform this airline into something sleek and efficient, something customers trusted. Then, she stepped toward her seat. "Excuse me, ma'am," came a voice from ahead. Celeste looked up. A blonde woman in her late 30s stood squarely in the aisle. Her uniform was pristine, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore the composure of someone used to being in control. Her name tag read Diana Harper, Senior Flight Attendant. "Yes," Celeste asked politely. Diana didn't smile. Her eyes traveled from Celeste's baseball cap to her sneakers, to the creases in her well-loved cardigan. "This cabin is reserved for our first-class guests," Diana said firmly. Celeste blinked. She reached into her bag and calmly retrieved her boarding pass. "I am in first class," she replied, holding it out. Diana didn't take the pass. She glanced at it briefly, but made no move to scan or inspect it. "There must be a mistake," she said. "Economy is boarding at the back." Celeste's voice didn't waver. "My ticket says 1A. I boarded properly. If you scan it, it will confirm." Diana's lips curled slightly. "Ma'am, let's not make this difficult. It wouldn't be the first time someone tried to slip into the wrong section, especially when they look confused." That word landed heavily in the space between them. Celeste felt it like a needle prick under the skin. She wasn't confused. She was calm. She was focused. But something else was stirring beneath her ribs now. Something familiar. The cold pulse of being underestimated. Again, she kept her voice soft. "Would you mind verifying it?" Please, Diana finally reached for the pass, but she didn't scan it. She simply stared at it with an expression of theatrical skepticism. "We'll need to look into this. Please step aside while we recheck our manifest." Celeste didn't move. "Is there an issue with my name?" "I didn't say that," Diana snapped. Sharper now. "But frankly, first-class passengers don't usually come dressed like this." There was no mistaking the implication. From behind her, Celeste heard a cough, a passenger shifting, eyes glancing over shoulders. She was being watched. Diana looked around too, then said a little louder, "This is a premium cabin. We're doing our best to protect the comfort of our elite travelers." Celeste's jaw tightened. She wasn't here to make a scene. She was here to observe, to witness. But even now, her fingers curled slightly around the handle of her carry-on, her other hand holding the ticket still extended. It was then that another crew member approached. A young man, maybe late 20s, with a charming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His name tag read Mark Brighton. "Problem, Diana?" he asked lightly. Diana handed him the boarding pass. "This lady says she's in 1A. Mark gave Celeste a once-over. Then he let out a small chuckle. "Really?" He tore the pass down the center. The sound of the paper ripping was sudden and brutal. Sharp. It sliced through the quiet hum of the cabin like a blade. Celeste didn't flinch, but inside, something broke. She looked down at the two halves of her ticket in Mark's hand, and then slowly raised her eyes to meet his. Mark smirked. "Ma'am, economy's that way, unless you'd like to be removed." He didn't know who she was. None of them did. Not yet. Celeste stood still. Her breath was measured, her eyes unreadable. But her silence was no longer passive. It was the sound of something bigger gathering strength. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The cabin was hushed. Celeste Warren stood unmoving in the aisle of Liberty Air Flight 262, her torn boarding pass hanging in the hand of a flight attendant who had just laughed in her face. The two jagged pieces still fluttered slightly between his fingers, as if the paper itself hadn't realized what had just been done. She looked down at them, not with shock, not with anger, but with a kind of aching clarity that only came from years of lived experience. It was never about the ticket. Never had been. Mark Brighton had ripped something much larger than a boarding pass. He had sliced through layers of assumptions, of dignity, of earned position. He had made a decision based entirely on what he saw when he looked at her. And Diana Harper stood beside him, arms crossed, her chin lifted in the same defiant arc that Celeste had seen 100 times across boardroom tables and under the tight smiles of investors who underestimated her. "You can't just destroy someone's ticket," Celeste said evenly. Diana's voice was laced with false patience. "We're simply preventing disruption. If you belong in first class, there would be no issue. But clearly, there's been some confusion." Mark leaned against the bulkhead casually. "Confusion happens all the time. You'd be surprised how many people try to sneak their way up here." Celeste didn't respond. She didn't need to. She turned her body slightly toward the aisle, silently taking in the expressions of the nearby passengers. Most avoided her gaze. A few stared openly, their faces unreadable. A man in a business suit shifted in his seat, tugged his cuffs, looked at his phone. A woman a few rows behind pulled her child closer, whispering something too low to catch. Celeste felt it, that collective breath hold, that waiting to see what the problem passenger would do next. She'd seen it before, in restaurants, in elevators, in meetings where her name had been mistaken for the assistant's. Now here, in a plane, where she had helped design the exact layout of the first-class seating. She looked at Mark again. "Your scanner would have confirmed my seat." He smiled without humor. "Don't worry about it. I'm sure someone from customer service can help you after we land." Celeste's fingers tightened slightly around her carry-on handle. She didn't yell, didn't flinch. Her tone remained even, but her chest ached with a strange, quiet grief. Because this wasn't about ego. It wasn't about proving who she was. It was about how easy it was for people like Diana and Mark to make others disappear, to erase someone from a list, from a cabin, from a seat, from a system. A voice crackled over the intercom, interrupting the tension. "Captain Russell Knox. Cabin crew. Prepare doors for departure. Final checks in progress." Diana tapped her earpiece, then looked back at Celeste. "I'm sorry, but we really need to begin departure procedures. Please return to the main cabin before we're forced to involve airport security." Celeste said nothing. She was already calculating, processing, not how to fight back, but how to hold the line with dignity. She reached into her crossbody purse and retrieved her ID. She held it up so Diana could see. "My name is Celeste Warren. You may verify it through your manifest. You may scan your system. And if you continue to refuse, I will escalate this matter." Diana tilted her head, unimpressed. "Ma'am, anyone can print a card and a fake ticket. We've had it happen before. And you don't exactly present like a high-tier traveler." The final word dripped with judgment. Celeste's pulse slowed. Her mind, however, quickened. It was time. She turned slightly, her voice low but crystal clear. "You don't know who I am?" Diana smirked. "You're right, I don't. But I know who you aren't." Mark laughed again. It echoed like static in the silent cabin. That was when a shift happened. Small, subtle, but real. A young woman near the front, no more than 25, maybe younger, stood slightly from her jump seat. Her voice was uncertain, but it carried. "I saw her ticket scan green. I was at the gate." Diana turned slowly, her eyes sharp. "Elena, that's not your place." The girl, Elena Wells, looked between them, visibly torn. Her lips trembled, but she didn't sit back down. It scanned. She repeated, softer, "I just thought you should know." Mark rolled his eyes. "Stay out of it, rookie." But something had already changed. Passengers were looking. Cameras were being raised. A man a few rows back tapped his phone screen. Another leaned over to whisper to the woman beside him. The air had shifted. Diana felt it. Celeste noticed it too. Alona's gaze found Celeste's, and something unspoken passed between them. Fear, guilt, hope. Celeste gave a slight nod, not of thanks, but of recognition. "You have a choice," she said quietly to Alona. Diana snapped. "That's enough." But Elena didn't sit. She swallowed hard and stepped forward. "I think we need to recheck the manifest." Diana turned to face her fully. Her voice dropped, sharp and slicing. "If you want to keep your job, Elena, sit down and do as you're told." Elena froze, and Celeste's heart ached watching the younger woman flinch. She remembered being that age, remembered that very choice. Stay quiet or stand for something. Elena trembled, but she didn't move back. The silence was now filled with breath. No one dared speak. Then Celeste calmly reached into her jacket and retrieved her phone. She dialed a number by memory and lifted it to her ear. On the other end, a calm, efficient voice answered, "Nina Clark." Celeste didn't lower her gaze. "It's me," she said. "It's happening." A beat passed. "Tell Alan to convene the board." "Immediately?" Mark frowned. "Who the hell are you talking to?" Celeste didn't answer him. The cabin stayed hushed. Elena was frozen in place, watching. Diana looked rattled, but tried to recover. "Enough of this drama," Diana snapped. "You're being disruptive, and the captain's already issued an instruction. Either you return to economy or we call security." Celeste turned her head just slightly toward her, phone still pressed to her ear. "Call whoever you like," she said calmly. "But I'd suggest you do it quickly, because in about 3 minutes, this entire situation will be out of your hands." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The gravity in her tone was enough to pull the entire cabin into stillness. Passengers shifted, eyes widened, phones continued recording. Diana opened her mouth to reply, but said nothing. The cabin door hadn't closed yet, and the real flight was just beginning. Elena Wells didn't move. Her feet were planted on the plush blue carpet just past the first-class galley, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. She had just contradicted her supervisor in front of the entire cabin. It wasn't in her training manual, and it certainly wasn't what she'd intended to do on her 3rd week working for Liberty Air. But something about what she'd just witnessed had shaken her, cracked open a sense of responsibility she couldn't ignore. She had seen that ticket scan green. She remembered it clearly because it had been one of the first she'd processed on the passenger manifest that morning. Seat 1A, Celeste Warren. No assistance requested. Priority boarding. A name that, even now, stirred something faintly familiar, though she hadn't yet connected the dots. Elena's voice had already left her lips before she could reason with herself. And now here she stood, facing Diana Harper's icy glare and Mark Brighton's mocking grin. The cabin remained dead silent. Passengers leaned slightly forward in their wide leather seats, eyes moving between the tense trio at the front, some with curiosity, others with suspicion, one or two with open disdain. Celeste, standing calmly amidst it all, had yet to react beyond the quiet determination in her posture. Mark spoke first. "You've got guts. Rookie, I'll give you that." Diana's mouth was tight. Her voice came out measured, but each word dropped like cold steel. "Elena, you are not in a position to make declarations about seating assignments. We've discussed protocol. If you believe you've seen something incorrect, you bring it to your lead, not to the entire aircraft. Elena's breath caught. Her cheeks were burning. I wasn't trying to cause a scene. I just thought Mark cut in, smirking. You thought wrong. Celeste turned to Elena then, her voice gentle and even. You did nothing wrong. She met Elena's eyes, and the expression she offered was not pity. It was something deeper. Respect. It takes courage to speak when the cost isn't clear. Thank you. Elena's eyes stung. She gave the faintest nod before Diana stepped between them, physically blocking the moment with a single decisive move. Captain Knox will handle this. I won't allow this disruption to continue. Celeste raised an eyebrow, her tone sharp now, though her volume never rose. You say disruption as if the issue is me standing here, not you tearing up a valid ticket and dismissing a junior attendant for telling the truth. Diana's jaw twitched, but she said nothing. From row 2C, a voice rang out suddenly. I saw her ticket scanned, too. It was a man in his early 30s, dark-skinned, dressed in a crisp tan jacket. His name tag clipped to his carry-on suggested he was a corporate traveler. Cameron Saunders, business consultant. He stood up halfway, one hand resting on the seat in front of him. The machine blinked green. I saw it. Everyone around me saw it, too. The tension in the cabin cracked. More murmurs followed, passengers shifting, phones lifting, slowly and steadily, some already recording. Next to him, an older woman with kind eyes and shoulder-length brown hair stood too. She looked at Diana directly. We're not blind. We all saw how you treated her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand anything. You just didn't like how she looked. Cameron turned to her with a nod. Thanks. Mom. Diana's composure faltered. You're filming this? She asked sharply. Liv Saunders, the mother, held up her phone without apology. You're in public. This is a commercial flight. If this is how Liberty Air treats first-class passengers, people deserve to know. Mark's cocky demeanor began to fade. He looked to Diana, whose face was now flushing with real unease. Celeste remained still. Passengers, please remain calm, Diana barked, her voice laced with desperation now. For safety reasons, no one should be recording. This is airline policy. But no one stopped. One row behind Celeste, a couple whispered to each other before the man raised his phone and pointed it forward. Another phone glinted under the soft LED cabin lights. The cameras were rolling now. The narrative was no longer being controlled by the crew. Celeste let the moment linger before she spoke again, her voice directed to no one and everyone at once. This is what it looks like when truth gets inconvenient. She turned slightly, catching Diana and Mark in her gaze. You could have verified my identity. Instead, you made a judgment. A permanent one. Diana stepped forward. You're escalating this intentionally. You're creating a hostile situation on my aircraft. Your aircraft. Celeste asked calmly. I wasn't aware flight attendants were assigned ownership of Liberty Air equipment. Before Diana could respond, the cockpit door clicked open. Captain Russell Knox stepped out with the same rigid posture he always carried. He was a tall man in his 50s, a former military pilot known for precision and control. He didn't smile, didn't speak right away, just looked at Celeste, then at Diana, then at the phone still raised around the cabin. What's going on here? He asked. Diana jumped to explain. This passenger claims to be in 1A, but there's a discrepancy. She caused a delay, and now multiple people are filming and refusing to cooperate. Captain Knox looked at Celeste. Ma'am, do you have documentation? Celeste slowly reached into her bag. She retrieved her ID, her elite status card, a printed copy of her reservation. She held them all out, as she had done before. The captain didn't move to take them. "We're behind schedule," he said. "I need you to return to the main cabin. If you don't comply, I'll have no choice but to involve airport security." "You didn't even look," Celeste said, her voice growing colder, her patience finally starting to thin. Captain Knox's eyes hardened. "I'm making a command decision. You can file a formal complaint later." Cameron spoke up again. "This is ridiculous. She's the only one being treated this way." Captain Knox raised his hand. "This isn't a democracy, folks. I am the final authority on this flight." Celeste stared at him for a moment. Then she slowly placed all her documents back into her bag. "I see." Captain Knox turned to Diana. "Have her escorted off now. I won't delay this flight another minute." Diana nodded eagerly, but just before she could move, Celeste raised her phone again, calmly, as if making a casual call. She dialed. "Nina," she said softly when the line picked up. "Are we live?" Nina Clark's voice came through, clear and composed. "Yes, Celeste. The board has been assembled. They've seen the footage from the passengers. The chair's awaiting your instruction." Diana's eyes widened. Mark's smirk vanished. Captain Knox blinked. Footage Celeste didn't look at them. She looked only at Elena. "Thank you for your honesty." Elena's breath caught. "You're welcome. Miss Warren." The name clicked. Captain Knox's expression turned to stone. "Wait. Celeste Warren." "Yes," she said, her voice unwavering. "CEO, shareholder, and today, passenger." A hush fell over the plane so complete that even the engines outside felt quiet. She held up her phone. "Alan, I believe it's time." A new voice came through. "This is Alan McCrae, board chair of Liberty Air. We confirm Celeste Warren's identity and full authority. Effective immediately. She has the discretion to act." Diana took a step back. Mark's throat bobbed in a silent swallow. Captain Knox looked down at the ground, stunned. Celeste didn't raise her voice, but the message had been delivered. Everything had changed. Captain Russell Knox stood in the middle of the first-class cabin. His jaw clenched so tightly the veins in his neck were visible. He had spent the last 22 years in the air, flying everything from C-130s to commercial jets, but he had never felt the heat of silence like this before. Celeste Warren, the woman he had just tried to remove, was now calmly holding a phone to her ear. The voice on the other end had confirmed her identity as CEO and shareholder of Liberty Air. Every eye on the plane was either on her or on him. He'd made a mistake, a critical, possibly career-ending mistake. Captain Knox had always prided himself on order, on protocol, on keeping emotions out of the cockpit. But as he looked at the steady, composed woman before him, he realized he had followed the wrong order this time. He had followed bias, not procedure. Celeste lowered her phone slowly and looked at him. Her voice was quiet, but it struck harder than any raised shout could. "You didn't even glance at my documents, Captain." Knox tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. "You dismissed me without inquiry. No verification, no scan, just assumption." Eleanor Wells stood to the side, still frozen. Her eyes darted between her captain and Celeste, the tension in her chest squeezing tighter with every second. Diana Harper, meanwhile, looked as if she'd seen a ghost. Her perfectly kept bun no longer looked so rigid. Her hands, usually steady and commanding, trembled slightly at her sides. "This is a misunderstanding," Diana said, grasping for control. "A procedural oversight." Celeste tilted her head. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a dismissal. Alan McRae's voice returned, this time coming directly through Celeste's speaker. Celeste, you are authorized to take immediate action. The board will support any decision you make regarding the involved parties. A soft gasp rippled through the cabin. Diana's knees visibly buckled. Captain Knox's posture stiffened. Ma'am, I accept responsibility for my part in this, but I made the call based on the report from my lead flight attendant. Celeste met his eyes. And did you not notice how quickly she escalated without evidence? How ready she was to make someone disappear with just a glance. Knox looked away. She stepped forward, her voice gentler now, but no less firm. This isn't just about me. This is about the hundreds of people before me who didn't have the power to make a phone call like I just did. She turned to face the rest of the cabin, those who were removed silently, without footage, without a trending hashtag, without a voice. A heavy quiet settled again. Liv Saunders lowered her phone for a moment, tears beginning to sting behind her glasses. Her son Cameron sat forward, elbows on his knees, phone still recording. They all knew it. This moment was no longer just about a single incident. It had become a reckoning. Diana cleared her throat and took a trembling step forward. Miss Warren, I didn't know who you were. I wasn't trying to disrespect your position. Celeste raised a hand. Stop. Diana froze. You didn't disrespect my position. You disrespected my humanity. Her words landed like a thunderclap. I could have been anyone. A teacher, a nurse, a student. It doesn't matter. You saw a black woman in casual clothes and decided she didn't belong here. Mark Brighton opened his mouth to defend, but thought better of it and lowered his gaze. And you, Celeste said, her eyes locking onto him, you destroyed a valid ticket. That was evidence. Legal documentation. Mark's cheeks flushed red. I was following Diana's lead. That's not a defense. That's a confession, Celeste replied. The cameras continued rolling. The weight of truth was suffocating now. Then, in a move no one expected, Elena stepped forward again. Miss Warren Celeste turned to her. I have something you should hear. She retrieved her phone and opened a voice recording. I didn't mean to capture it. I was off to the side before boarding, and my phone started recording when I dropped it in my pocket. She pressed play. The recording filled the quiet cabin. Diana's voice came through first. Just flag her name. We don't need anyone questioning why someone like her is sitting in one. Mark responded with a low chuckle. You're right. Let's delete it. If she gets through, we'll just say it was a system error. She won't argue. She doesn't look like the type. A gasp rippled through the passengers. Diana's voice again. Worst case. She goes viral. Big deal. They forget in a week. Elena stopped the audio. Her hand trembled. She couldn't meet anyone's eyes. I didn't know what to do. I just knew I couldn't pretend I didn't hear it. Celeste didn't move for several seconds. Then she reached out and gently placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. You did the right thing. You listened to your conscience. She turned back to the cabin. And for that, she'll be a part of the reform team starting today. Diana's face lost all color. Celeste looked back at the senior crew, her voice finally cooling. Captain Knox, Diana Harper, Mark Brighton, you are hereby relieved of duty. You have 5 minutes to collect your belongings and step off this aircraft. Mark looked stunned. You can't do that. Alan McRae's voice chimed through the speaker again. She absolutely can. Knox didn't protest. He gave a slight nod. the weight of his career collapsing in his chest. Diana looked toward the back of the cabin, desperate for support that didn't exist. "Security will escort you," Celeste added, gesturing toward the front. Monica Drew, the airport's senior security officer, stepped on board. She had been waiting outside since the call was placed. Her stance was professional, neutral, but firm. "Please gather your items," she said quietly to the crew. Captain Knox turned without a word. Diana hesitated, then finally moved. Head down. Mark muttered something under his breath, but didn't resist. As they walked past Celeste, she didn't move. She didn't gloat. She didn't gloat because this wasn't about revenge. This was about setting things right. As they disappeared down the aisle, the silence was replaced with a wave of whispers and soft applause. Not loud, not theatrical, but respectful. Cameron leaned toward his mother. "She really did it." Liv smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "No, son, she's just getting started." Celeste looked around, at the passengers who had watched this unfold, at Elena, standing strong despite her fear, at the empty seats left behind by those who had misused their power. She inhaled deeply, and then she finally sat. Row 1A, her rightful seat. The first-class seat felt colder than she remembered. Celeste Warren sat back in 1A, her carry-on placed carefully at her feet, her hands resting atop her lap as if folded in prayer. Outside the aircraft window, the sun had climbed a few degrees higher, painting the tarmac in golden streaks that glinted against the wings of Liberty Air Flight 262. The cabin was quiet. Not the suffocating silence from earlier, but something else. Something softer. Still. As if the air itself was trying to process what had just happened. For the first time since she'd stepped onto the plane, Celeste allowed herself to exhale fully. She had done it. She had made the call, stood her ground, fired 3 crew members, and taken back the seat she had always rightfully owned. But there was no pride rising in her chest. There was only the heavy ache that came from knowing it had taken all that witnesses, recordings, board calls to be seen. She didn't want applause. She didn't want the headlines that she could already feel being written. She wanted change, and that never came easy. Elena approached cautiously. Her voice was soft. "Miss Warren, I brought you a water, sparkling, like you requested." Celeste looked up, her expression warm. "Thank you, Elena." She took the bottle gently, their fingers brushing for just a second. Elena hesitated, then slid into the jump seat across from her, clearly nervous. "I hope I didn't overstep earlier." "You didn't. You stepped forward," Celeste replied. "There's a difference." Elena swallowed hard. "I didn't know who you were, I swear. I saw what was happening, and I felt sick." Celeste studied her for a moment. "You ever been dismissed?" Elena looked through like glass. Elena nodded slowly. "In college. First job. Some family dinners. Then you know, even if it doesn't happen on an airplane." They sat in silence for a few beats. A quiet understanding settled between them. Elena pulled out her notepad, the corner of it dog-eared and frayed. "Would it be okay if I got your full name again? Just for internal reporting. I want to document this the right way." Celeste smiled faintly. "You can just write Passenger 1A. Gave voice to many." Elena blinked, caught off guard by the humility in that. "But you're the CEO. Shouldn't it reflect? It should reflect what matters. And today, it wasn't my title. It was my presence." Elena looked down at her notepad, her throat tightening. "You know, when I first got this job, I was so excited just to wear the uniform. Thought I was stepping into something graceful, prestigious. She looked up again. But then I saw how some passengers get treated, how some crew members behave when they think no one's watching. Celeste nodded. We build these systems to be sleek and clean, but they pick up the stains of the people who use them. The intercom crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I'd like to thank you for your patience during the delay. We are now cleared for pushback and will begin taxiing shortly. Celeste's eyes closed for a moment as the cabin vibrated gently beneath her, the familiar rumble of an aircraft coming to life. She opened them slowly and glanced around. Several passengers met her gaze, some with gratitude, some with guilt, others with something closer to awe. But it was the older black woman in 3D, the one who hadn't spoken once during the ordeal, who gave the smallest nod. It wasn't loud. It wasn't for show. It was recognition. Celeste returned it quietly. The engines hummed louder, and the aircraft rolled back from the gate. Through the window, the terminal began to recede. A young boy from row 4 peeked into the aisle, holding his mother's hand, his eyes locked onto Celeste's, wide and curious. His mom whispered something and began to pull him away. But Celeste gave a gentle wave. The boy smiled. She thought of all the children who would grow up flying, who would sit in window seats with their noses pressed to the glass, dreaming of clouds and destinations. She wondered what kind of memory this flight would become for that boy. Hopefully one where he learned what courage looked like. Elena shifted nervously in her seat. Miss Warren, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you wait? You could have revealed who you were at the gate. This whole thing might have never happened. Celeste looked out the window, her face reflected in the glass for just a moment, because waiting shows who people really are. She turned back. I wasn't trying to trap anyone, but I wanted to know. Not for show, for truth. Elena furrowed her brow. That's brave, but also painful. Truth usually is. The aircraft jolted gently as it turned onto the runway. The cabin lights dimmed slightly in preparation for takeoff. Celeste reached into her purse and pulled out her journal, a small leather-bound book with a ribbon tucked into the last page she'd written. She flipped to a new one. Elena leaned forward, watching curiously. Are you writing about what happened? I'm writing what I felt, Celeste said. Facts will be recorded in reports. Feelings, they fade unless you catch them fast. She scribbled a few lines, then paused. How did you feel? She asked Elena. Elena's eyes widened. Terrified, embarrassed, angry, hopeful. I think, at the end. Celeste wrote those words down too. Good. Hold on to them. They'll help you speak with clarity later. The cabin started to tilt slightly as the aircraft lifted from the runway. The hum of flight surrounded them now. Light turbulence danced beneath their feet. Elena smiled softly. I think I understand why you're in the position you are. Celeste gave a faint laugh. Because I take notes? Because you listen. Celeste looked up from her journal, touched by the sincerity in the girl's voice. A gentle chime echoed through the speakers. We've reached 10,000 feet. You may now use approved electronic devices. Celeste tucked her journal away. The sky outside was vast, clear, limitless. Elena stood, adjusting her uniform blouse nervously. I'll get back to service. But thank you. Miss Warren. Really. Call me Celeste. Elena nodded. Thank you. Celeste. She stepped back down the aisle, disappearing into the galley. Celeste sat quietly for a moment longer. The seat now felt warm, not because it had changed, but because she had reclaimed it. with truth, with calm, with resistance born of restraint. She glanced around again. There would be more battles. Not every moment would have cameras or witnesses, but she had left a mark today, not just on Liberty Air, but on every passenger who had watched her refuse to disappear. She reached for her water, took a slow sip, and whispered softly to herself, "Seat 1A, today you earned your name back." Celeste Warren leaned her head gently against the headrest of Seat 1A. The engine's steady hum filled her ears as Liberty Air Flight 262 leveled off above the clouds. She stared out the window at the blanket of white below, the sharp blue of the sky above. There was something about the altitude that always reset her thoughts. It was why she had refused private jets, even when the board insisted. She liked being among people, among strangers. It reminded her of the world she was accountable to. Today, it had also reminded her how far that world still had to go. She pulled her journal back out and opened to the page she had started earlier. A few neat lines sat at the top. They didn't see me, but I never disappeared. Seat 1A, reclaimed. Celeste tapped the pen to her lip, thinking. Beneath that, she began another line. This one wasn't a poem. It was a question. How many others were asked to prove they belonged? She didn't know the answer. She doubted anyone truly did. Elna passed by again, this time checking on the second beverage service. Her face had relaxed some, but her eyes still held the residue of the morning's chaos. She paused near Celeste's brow. "Let me know if you need anything else." Celeste smiled gently. "You've already done more than most would." Helena blushed lightly. Then she asked something unexpected. "How did you get here?" Celeste blinked. "You mean Seat 1A?" "No. I mean, how did you become?" Celeste chuckled softly. "That's a long story." Helena hesitated. "I don't mean to be too forward. I've never met someone like you, especially not who looks like me. And you handled everything so calmly. I would have crumbled." Celeste nodded thoughtfully, then gestured to the empty seat beside her. "Sit down, just for a minute." Helena looked around nervously, then slid into the seat. Celeste folded her hands in her lap, then looked over. "My mother cleaned houses for over 30 years. My father was a postal worker. We didn't have a lot, but what we had, they protected like it was gold." Helena listened, captivated. "I got into college because my mom ironed the shirts of the admissions dean's assistant. She slipped one of my essays into his stack without asking. That's how my story started. That's incredible." Celeste smiled faintly. "It was bold, risky, but it taught me something early. No one is going to hand you a seat at the table. Sometimes you've got to carry your own chair." Helena laughed softly. "I love that. But carrying your own chair gets heavy after a while. People look at you strange, like you're arrogant for believing you belong." Celeste's voice drifted into something softer now. "That's why this morning hurt more than I expected. After all these years, after all these seats I've earned, someone still tried to take this one from me." Helena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "But you took it back." "Yes, but I wish I hadn't needed to." A chime sounded. The pilot's voice crackled over the speakers again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be experiencing a bit of light turbulence for the next 20 minutes. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Helena stood reluctantly. "That's my cue." "Thank you for asking," Celeste said. "For listening." Helena smiled and returned to the galley. Across the aisle, Liv Saunders leaned in from 3D. "That girl's got spirit." "She does," Celeste replied. She's lucky to have met you this early in her career. Celeste turned toward Liv. You filmed everything, didn't you? Sure did. Are you planning to post it? Liv hesitated. I wasn't sure. I wanted to talk to you first. I didn't want to use your pain as content. Celeste appreciated that more than she could say. The truth is, Liv continued, this kind of thing, it happens more than people admit, and most folks won't believe it unless they see it. That's the trap, isn't it? Celeste murmured, being both the victim and the evidence. Liv sighed. Exactly. Celeste thought for a moment. If you do post it, include context. Don't let it be a scandal reel. Let it be a call to conscience. Liv smiled. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. At the back of the first-class section, a tall man in a navy blazer stood slowly. His face was somber, his hair gray at the temples. He made his way forward, stopping just short of Celeste's brow. Excuse me, he said quietly. I didn't say anything earlier. I was in seat 5A. Celeste looked up. You don't owe me an explanation. Maybe not, but I owe myself one. I sat and watched it all. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't pull out my phone. I just froze. His voice wavered. I tell myself, I'm not like them, that I treat people fairly. But this morning, I realized I still have work to do. Celeste gestured to the seat beside her. Sit. He did, carefully. She extended her hand. Celeste, Daniel Kerrigan, thank you for coming forward. Daniel. He looked embarrassed. I should have done more in the moment. We all like to think we'd be brave at the right time. The truth is, the moment chooses us, not the other way around. He nodded, eyes glassy. You changed the air in here today. Celeste gave a soft chuckle. That was never my goal. I just wanted to get to Chicago in peace. Daniel smiled faintly. The right people never seek power just for power. They use it to level the field. Celeste looked at him thoughtfully. Are you with Liberty Air? No, I'm in legal. Partner at a firm that's consulted with your team on diversity frameworks. I think it's time we made that more than a box to check. Celeste's eyes lit up. Then let's talk after we land. Daniel stood again. You've got it. As he returned to his seat, Celeste leaned back. Every voice mattered, even the late ones. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the morning settle in her bones. Somewhere behind her, a child giggled, a clink of glassware, a sigh. Real life resumed. But something in the air had shifted. 30,000 feet above ground. A story had been rewritten. Not just hers, but everyone's. Celeste Warren kept her gaze steady on the clouds beyond the glass. From this height, the world looked deceptively peaceful. Smooth white horizons. A sky unbothered by human division. But beneath those clouds, conversations were brewing. News was spreading. And soon, the sky would no longer be a quiet place. Her phone vibrated in her lap. She glanced down. Nina Clark. She accepted the call with a quiet tap, holding it just beneath her chin. You've gone viral. Celeste exhaled slowly. Of course I have. It's everywhere, Nina said, her voice both anxious and impressed. Twitter, Instagram, even the morning anchors are talking about the CEO in 1A. Celeste closed her eyes. What about the board? They're in emergency PR mode, but Alan's holding firm behind you. Celeste opened her eyes again and whispered, Tell them to wait. No press release. Not yet. You sure? Yes. Let the people speak first. Nina hesitated, then added, They're calling it the 1A incident. You're trending in 30 countries. Celeste gave a soft, weary smile. That's not the legacy I wanted to make mid-flight. After ending the call, she switched her phone to airplane mode and set it down. The weight of the moment settled around her like fog. The cabin lights dimmed ever so slightly as the plane cruised forward. Elena returned with a warm blanket and set it on Celeste's lap without a word. "For your comfort," she said. "Thank you," Celeste replied. She noticed Elena's hand shake slightly as she tucked in the edges of the blanket. "Are you all right?" Elena bit her lip and lowered her voice. "I just saw the video. I was tagged. My face is there. You stood up for the truth. That's nothing to hide from. But my family, my father's going to panic. He already thinks I should have become a nurse instead of working flights." Celeste reached over and placed her hand on Elena's. "You were meant to be here, not just on this flight, but in this exact moment." Elena's eyes glistened. Celeste continued. "Moments like this carve people open, some run, some harden, others become who they were always meant to be. Which one am I?" Celeste smiled gently. "That's for you to decide, but I see someone becoming—" The PA system chimed again. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your new captain speaking, First Officer Rachel Sims. I want to thank you for your patience today. We are now cruising at 33,000 feet, with clear skies ahead." The cabin murmured slightly at the sound of a new voice. Celeste sat up straighter. A female pilot had taken the reins. She leaned toward Elena. Was she on the manifest earlier? No. She must have been brought in after Captain Knox was relieved. "Good choice," Celeste murmured to herself. The announcement continued. "We'll be arriving in Chicago approximately 40 minutes behind schedule. We thank you again for flying Liberty Air." A few passengers clapped lightly. Celeste noticed Daniel Kerrigan glance up from his laptop and nod with quiet approval. The flight moved forward with new rhythm. Snack service resumed. Headphones clicked into place. A baby in coach cried for a few minutes and was gently hushed by a lullaby from its mother. Still, despite the calm, Celeste could feel the tension running beneath the stillness. Not fear, change. A few rows behind her, a woman in a gray blazer hesitated, then slowly approached. Her name tag read Cassandra Blake, a regional manager with Liberty Air, en route to a Chicago conference. "Excuse me." Miss Warren Celeste turned toward her. "I wanted to say, I saw what happened, and I've worked with Diana Harper before. This wasn't an isolated incident, but this is the first time someone actually held her accountable." "Thank you," Celeste said simply. Cassandra continued, her voice lower. "There are a lot of us inside the system, trying to make change, but it's hard to speak up when power protects power." Celeste tilted her head thoughtfully. "How many do you think there are?" "Enough," Cassandra said. "But we need a structure, a signal, a way to know someone's listening." Celeste's mind was already turning. "Would you write me after we land? I'd like to hear your ideas. You have no idea how long I've waited for someone in your position to say that." Cassandra returned to her seat with a look of purpose on her face. Celeste took a slow breath. Ripples. That's how reform began. Quiet ones, at first, then a current. She tapped her fingers on her armrest. In her peripheral vision, she noticed Liv Saunders with her phone again, speaking softly to Cameron. "You still recording?" He nodded, his teenage fingers quick on the setting screen. "Almost done. Editing the highlight cut," he said. Celeste raised a brow. "Highlight. Yeah. Like the key parts. Your response. The moment they tore your ticket. The recording from Elena." "We synced it all," Liv added. "We're not publishing anything until we show it to you. You deserve control of your own story." Celeste gave a slow, grateful nod. Then her eyes wandered to the far end of the cabin where a group of college students had been whispering among themselves. One of them, a young woman with thick curly hair and paint-stained jeans, got up and walked timidly toward her. "Hi. Sorry to bother you. I just wanted to say thank you." Celeste smiled. "What's your name, Maya?" "Maya Trent. I'm studying social justice and digital media. I've read about you. I never thought I'd see something like this play out in front of me." "Neither did I," Celeste said softly. Maya hesitated. "Can I quote something you said earlier? About being looked through like glass?" "Of course. Just make sure people understand that the pain behind those words is real." Maya nodded, her eyes bright. "I will." She turned to go, then paused. "One day, I want to build a platform for passengers to anonymously report discrimination during flights, kind of like a digital trail." Celeste sat up straighter. "You build that, and I'll fund it." Maya's mouth fell open. "Are you serious completely?" Maya beamed and rushed back to her friends. Celeste leaned back again. The plane wasn't just carrying passengers anymore. It was carrying momentum. At that moment, a short turbulence wave rocked the aircraft. The overhead bins rattled gently, and a few gasps were heard. Celeste closed her eyes, breathing through it. When it passed, a different kind of quiet fell, the kind that came after a storm. The seatbelt sign blinked. The captain's voice returned. "We're beginning our initial descent into Chicago. Please ensure your seats are upright and tray tables stowed." Celeste felt a deep, resonant beat in her chest. This was the final leg of a flight that would never be forgotten. She reached for her journal one last time. This time, she didn't write a poem. She drew a circle. Then, inside it, one word: voice. The announcement of descent triggered the usual rustle of motion. Passengers adjusted seat backs, stowed laptops, clicked buckles into place. But on Flight 262, the air felt heavier than the usual pre-landing routine. It wasn't anxiety, it was awareness. A collective sense that they had all become part of something bigger than just another flight. Celeste Warren rested her hands on her lap, palms open and steady. Her breathing was slow, methodical. Outside her window, the clouds began to break, revealing patches of the earth below. Chicago stretched wide in the distance, scattered with glinting rooftops and roads already choking with traffic. But Celeste wasn't thinking about traffic. She was thinking about what waited at the gate. Nina had texted once more before switching to flight mode. "Media at terminal. 2 board reps arriving. Stay composed." "I'm right behind them." Celeste had replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. But now, with landing minutes away, she wasn't sure her fingers would be that steady again. In the rows behind her, hushed conversations buzzed with anticipation. Some passengers were coordinating who would post what first. Others were nervously checking the footage they'd captured, as if questioning their own bravery in hindsight. A few simply sat in silence, processing. Elena returned to the front of the cabin. Her face was pale but composed. "Would you like anything else before we land?" Miss Warren's Celeste gave her a warm, grounding smile. "No, thank you. You've done more than enough today." Elena stood for a moment longer, as if wanting to say something else. Then she quietly stepped into the galley and fastened herself into the jump seat. Celeste turned back toward the window. The aircraft dipped slightly as it made its final turn toward O'Hare. The view outside shimmered with cityscape and steel. Suddenly, a new voice appeared beside her. It was Daniel Kerrigan again, standing quietly in the aisle. "Do you mind if I sit here during landing?" "Of course not." He slid into the seat next to her, eyes calm. "You've been incredibly composed throughout all of this." Celeste offered a soft laugh. "That's not the same as being unshaken." Daniel folded his hands. "It's been a long time since I've seen a room shift its energy because of one person." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Then maybe it's time more of us stopped waiting for rooms to give us permission." A pause stretched between them. Then Daniel asked, "Do you think Liberty Air will recover?" Celeste's voice lowered. "Recovery depends on truth. And the truth is, this wasn't an anomaly. This was a symptom. If we address only the faces and not the foundation, we'll be right back here next month." "So what happens now?" "Change." She didn't say it like a threat. She said it like a fact. The aircraft wheels dropped into landing position with a soft thud beneath them. A light ping signaled seatbelt checks. The city loomed larger now, concrete and glass racing to meet them. A young man across the aisle turned slightly and gave Celeste a thumbs up. She acknowledged it with a small nod. Moments later, Flight 262 touched down with a soft, even bounce. The brakes engaged, the engine whined, and within seconds the aircraft slowed to a crawl. The passengers remained seated, unusually quiet, as the aircraft taxied to the gate. Celeste reached down, pulled out her bag, and placed it on her lap. Elena's voice echoed softly through the cabin. "Welcome to Chicago. Please remain seated until the captain has turned off the seatbelt sign." The plane rolled into its final stop. Outside the window, Celeste spotted the blinking of local news camera crews, already positioned near the gate. Two sharply dressed Liberty Air executives stood at a slight distance, whispering something into headsets. They weren't here for optics. They were here for damage control. The seatbelt sign turned off with a soft ping. The cabin erupted into activity. Bags were pulled from overhead bins. Coats were shrugged on. Murmured goodbyes passed between strangers. Celeste remained seated. Elena came forward first. "They're waiting for you by the door." Celeste nodded. "Let them wait." Elena hesitated. "You don't want to go now, no. I want every other passenger to exit before I do." Elena blinked. "Why? Because today wasn't just about me. It was about them. Let them walk out first. Let them leave knowing they were seen." Elena gave a quiet, respectful nod and stepped back. One by one, the passengers made their way down the aisle. Some glanced back with admiration. Some offered whispered words of thanks. A few simply smiled, a silent expression of solidarity. Maya Trent was one of the last to pass. She reached out to squeeze Celeste's hand. "I meant what I said. I'm building that app." Celeste squeezed back gently. "And I meant what I said. I'll be waiting for your email." When only Celeste remained. Elena returned with her. "They're ready now." Celeste rose, collected her things, and stepped into the aisle. The cabin was still and empty. The echoes of voices now faded. The quiet felt earned. She walked to the door slowly, deliberately. As she stepped out into the jet bridge, the flashes began. A wall of cameras, microphones held out, voices shouting questions. "Miss Warren, do you have a statement? What message do you want to send? Did you know this would happen?" She held up a hand, not to silence, but to ground them. "I will speak, but not here, behind the crowd." She spotted Nina Clark, her assistant and longtime friend, holding a press badge and motioning her toward a quieter corner of the gate. Celeste followed, walking past the Liberty Air executives who stiffened slightly at her approach. One of them, a tall man with graying hair and dark-rimmed glasses, stepped forward. "Miss Warren, I'm Thomas Heller, VP of Operations. On behalf of Liberty Air, I want to express our deepest apologies for today's Celeste held up a finger, then pointed calmly. You'll speak to my legal team. I'll speak to the public. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Heller stepped back. Nina stepped up. We've secured a private briefing room upstairs. Press are being filtered. Alan McCrae's waiting with senior counsel. Celeste nodded. Let's go. As they moved through the terminal, passengers pointed, whispered, even clapped, but Celeste's focus was inward. She was already drafting her next steps, her plan for internal audit, employee reform, public transparency, not for revenge, but for every passenger who had once been told they didn't belong. Nina opened a private door leading to the upstairs briefing area. Inside stood Alan McCrae, the Liberty Air Board chair, flanked by two legal advisors. His arms were crossed, his face unreadable. Welcome home, Celeste. She smiled faintly. Let's get to work. The walls of the briefing room were plain, sterile, and brightly lit, but the air inside was thick with anticipation. Celeste Warren stepped in with the calm composure of someone who had fought battles in boardrooms far colder than this one. Still, the gravity of this meeting pressed into her chest. Alan McCrae stood near a large oval table, his silver cufflinks catching the light. Beside him, Liberty Air's senior counsel, Marissa Gelman, and internal ethics officer, Jordan Lee, reviewed documents and watched her closely. Celeste placed her handbag on the table and removed a leather-bound folder. Alan greeted her with a nod. We watched everything. All of it. I assumed you would, she replied. I also assumed this would be handled with care. The airline failed you. Celeste, we failed you. She narrowed her eyes slightly. Not just me. You failed every employee watching to see if respect is real, and every passenger who wonders if their dignity has an expiration date at 30,000 feet. Alan nodded slowly. We've placed Diana Harper and Mark Brighton on immediate suspension, pending termination review. We've launched an emergency investigation into all discriminatory reports in the past 2 years. Celeste remained still, and Alan exchanged a glance with Marissa, who spoke next. We're proposing a formal apology, a full reimbursement to all passengers on Flight 262, and a donation to an anti-bias aviation initiative in your name. Celeste raised an eyebrow. Symbolic gestures are a start. But symbolism doesn't dismantle a culture. Systems do. She opened her folder and slid a printed document across the table. This is the framework I want adopted immediately. A complete re-education program, anonymous reporting tools, a dedicated inclusion oversight committee. I want internal audits released quarterly. Transparency from top to bottom. Jordan Lee skimmed the paper, eyes widening. You built this. I've been building it for years. Today gave me a reason to release it. Alan reviewed the outline, clearly impressed. This goes far beyond public relations. That's the point. We're not saving face. We're saving our future. The room fell into a heavy silence. Then Alan folded his hands on the table, and the crew Celeste's voice didn't waver. All flight attendants on Flight 262 will be grounded pending full interviews. If they acted in complicity, they go. If they remain silent out of fear, we offer training. And if they spoke up, like Elena Wells, we elevate them. Marissa leaned in. You want to promote Elena? I want to protect and reward courage. Silence has been currency in this industry for too long. Jordan looked up from the document. You really think we can implement all this? Celeste gave a small smile. You asked me to fix your diversity problem, I'm handing you the blueprint. You just have to decide if you're ready to stop pretending it was ever about numbers." Alan sighed deeply. "The board will resist. Then tell them I'm not asking. I'm invoking Clause 17B, my authority as executive board chair during crisis review." "That's aggressive," Marissa warned. "That's necessary," Celeste replied. She stood and walked toward the wall-length window, looking out at the jet bridge and the parked plane beyond. Her reflection stared back at her, strong and still. "When I started with this company, they asked me to smile more, be softer, more approachable. For years, I molded myself to be palatable to people who didn't know what to do with power in my skin." She turned back toward them. "Today, I watched a grown woman rip my ticket in half without blinking, because somewhere along the way, she was taught that I could be removed without consequence. Not anymore." The room was silent again. Alan cleared his throat. "There's another issue. The video." Celeste nodded slowly. "Let it breathe. You want us to wait? Yes. Don't fight the press. Don't spin a narrative. The public will speak first. When they do, we respond not with apology, but with action." Marissa scribbled a note. "And what about you? Are you ready to speak publicly?" Celeste's gaze darkened. "I already have. Every second of that flight was a speech." Jordan leaned forward. "What you did, it was brave, but it was also costly." Celeste met his eyes. "Then let's make the cost count." Alan finally sat down, arms crossed. "You've already made your position clear, so let me make mine. We stand behind you. But if we do this, we can't half-step it. It will change everything." "Good. Let it." Jordan exhaled and closed the folder. "Then let's rebuild the airline. From seat 1A outward." Celeste nodded, her voice quiet now. "We'll call it the 1A Initiative." Alan chuckled softly. "That's poetic." "No," Celeste replied. "It's justice." Marissa stood. "I'll draw up the first draft tonight." Celeste turned toward Nina, who had been silently waiting in the corner, phone in hand. "Nina, tell the press we'll be issuing an official statement in 48 hours. I'll address the nation live." "From where?" "From that seat. 1A. Marissa looked puzzled. "You're going to fly again. Now tomorrow. Same route. Same seat. With the world watching." Jordan blinked. "That's bold. That's the point." Celeste collected her things and turned to the door. "We're not just flying anymore. We're rewriting the altitude of accountability." She opened the door and left the room, her heels echoing through the corridor like a declaration. Outside, in the lounge, passengers from Flight 260 were still milling around. Some greeted her with smiles. Others simply stepped aside, parting like water before her path. She saw Maya Trent standing by the window, speaking to a local reporter. When Maya saw her, she smiled and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Celeste simply nodded. Behind her, Liberty Air's senior executives trailed out of the room, papers clutched in their hands like blueprints to a new world. Celeste stood for a moment at the edge of the gate, staring out across the tarmac, the hum of the engine somewhere far off. Tomorrow, the world would watch her board another flight, but today, she had already taken off. Celeste Warren sat by the window of her modest Chicago apartment, the city lights twinkling faintly beyond the glass. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of her laptop and the occasional distant siren weaving through the night. Tomorrow, she would board another Liberty Air flight. The same route, the same seat, but nothing would be the same. She exhaled slowly and opened her journal. Her fingers traced the words she had written during the last flight, the ones that now felt like a promise, more than a memory. Seat 1, reclaimed. Her eyes drifted to the blank page beneath. What would she write next? She closed the journal and reached for her phone. Messages from Nina Clark pinged softly. Plans, press schedules, security details, staff briefings. Celeste's mind spun, not with anxiety, but with resolve. She had spent years climbing this ladder, fighting for respect, for equity, for inclusion. But climbing alone wasn't enough anymore. She had to pull others up with her. Her phone buzzed again. This time a text from Maya Trent. Finalizing app prototype tonight. Hope to have a demo for you soon. Celeste smiled. The spark of hope in that message, a balm to her restless mind. She set the phone down and moved toward the small kitchen. A pot of tea brewed quietly on the stove, filling the air with chamomile's gentle scent. She poured a cup and returned to the window seat. The city stretched beneath her, a web of lives, stories, struggles. And tomorrow, she would add another chapter to that web. She thought about the crew she had fired: Diana Harper, Mark Brighton, Russell Knox. Their faces had haunted her, not out of vengeance, but because they symbolized the systemic rot she was determined to excise. Would they understand the magnitude of what had happened, or would they dismiss it as a blip, a scandal to be weathered? Celeste doubted they would change without consequence. But change would come, because she would see to it. Her mind flicked back to Elna Wells, the young flight attendant who had trembled with fear, but found courage. She imagined Elna's future elevated, empowered, a beacon for others trapped in silence. She hoped Liberty Air's future would include many more like her. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a reminder from her assistant press conference scheduled at 10 a.m., live streaming on all channels. Celeste sipped her tea. The world would be watching. She thought about the words she would say, not just as a CEO, but as a woman who had been seen and unseen too many times. Her thoughts drifted to her childhood, the lessons her parents taught her about dignity and perseverance, about standing tall even when the world tried to diminish you. She pictured the faces of passengers who had witnessed the incident, strangers who had become allies in a moment of shared humanity. And she whispered softly to herself, "This is just the beginning. Tomorrow would demand everything she had." But she was ready. The night deepened outside. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of history pressing gently on her shoulders, but also the light of possibility. Tomorrow, the sky would hear her. The conference room was packed. Cameras flashed relentlessly. Reporters murmured excitedly, and the air thrummed with anticipation. Celeste Warren stood behind the podium, poised and calm, the sharp lines of her tailored blazer a contrast to the softness in her eyes. A deep breath. She looked out at the sea of faces, all waiting to hear her story. But this wasn't about her alone anymore. It was about every passenger who had ever been made to feel invisible or unwelcome, every employee who had stayed silent out of fear. She began, "Good morning. Today, I stand before you not just as the CEO of Liberty Air, but as a woman who was denied her rightful seat, a seat earned by years of dedication, investment, and commitment." She paused briefly, letting the weight of her words settle. For too long, our industry has allowed prejudice to hide behind policies and uniforms. For too long, passengers and employees alike have suffered in silence. No more. Her voice strengthened. The incident on Flight 262 was not an isolated mistake. It was a symptom of a deeper, systemic failure, a culture that allowed discrimination to persist unchecked. She looked down at her notes, then back up. That culture ends today. Liberty Air is launching the 1A initiative, a comprehensive overhaul to root out bias, empower employees, and guarantee dignity for every person on every flight. She spoke with passion now, her tone both fierce and hopeful. We will implement mandatory training, anonymous reporting systems, and transparent audits. We will elevate voices that have been silenced, and we will ensure accountability at every level. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked. One hand shot up. Ms. Warren, how do you respond to critics who say this is a PR stunt? Celeste met the question head on. Change is never easy. It's uncomfortable. It requires courage from leadership and from every individual. This is not about optics. This is about justice. Another question. Were you fearful during the incident? Her gaze softened. Fear is real. It visits us all, but it cannot govern our actions. She continued, I chose to stand firm because no one should ever be made to feel unworthy of respect, especially not on my watch. Hands raised again. The questions came faster now about policies, timelines, and personal stories. Celeste answered each with clarity and conviction. At one point, a reporter asked about the crew members who were terminated. Celeste responded carefully. While we respect the privacy of individuals, discriminatory behavior will not be tolerated. Those involved are no longer with Liberty Air. As the conference drew to a close, Celeste made one final statement. To everyone listening, whether you've flown with us or not know this, your dignity matters. Your voice matters. And together, we can build an industry that reflects those truths. The room erupted into applause. Celeste stepped away from the podium, feeling a mixture of relief and resolve. Outside, reporters continued to buzz. Social media had already exploded with support and debate. Hashtags like Opinion Seat 1A and Liberty Air Justice were trending worldwide. Nina Clark approached, smiling. You were incredible. Celeste smiled back. This was only step one. As they walked out, Celeste's phone buzzed with messages, offers to speak at conferences, invitations from advocacy groups, and countless stories of discrimination shared by strangers. She paused to read one message from Maya Trent. Proud to know you. Let's keep pushing forward. Celeste's heart swelled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but today had made history. She looked up at the sky, visible through the large windows of the conference center. The sky had heard her, and it was listening. Celeste Warren stood by the large window of Liberty Air's corporate headquarters, watching planes take off and land against the backdrop of a crisp morning sky. The city hummed beneath her feet, a pulse of energy and possibility. It had been a whirlwind since Flight 262. The incident had ignited a firestorm, but also sparked a movement within and beyond the walls of Liberty Air. The 1A initiative had launched with overwhelming support, forcing every department to look inward. Celeste thought about the flight attendants she had met during the first flight, the young woman Elena Wells among them. Elena was now part of the Inclusion Oversight Committee, a living testament to courage rewarded. She reflected on the passengers who had witnessed that day, many of whom had shared their own stories of prejudice and resilience. Their voices formed a chorus of change that grew louder every day. Celeste's phone buzzed. A message from Maya Trent, the activist and digital media student she had promised to support. We're ready for the beta launch of the reporting app. Couldn't have done it without you. A smile spread across Celeste's face. Progress in motion. But she knew the work was far from over. Changing culture was a marathon, not a sprint. It required patience, persistence, and unwavering commitment. She turned away from the window and into the boardroom where the Liberty Air leadership team had gathered. The energy was different, now focused, determined, united. Alan McRae stood at the head of the table, nodding approvingly as Celeste presented new data on inclusion metrics and employee engagement. She spoke with passion and clarity, her voice carrying the weight of lived experience. We've begun to see the impact of transparency and accountability. More employees are reporting concerns, and more leaders are responding. A hand raised. It was Marissa Gelman. How do you ensure this momentum continues beyond the initial surge? Celeste smiled. By making equity inseparable from excellence. When fairness becomes part of our operational DNA, it won't be an initiative. It will be who we are. Outside the meeting room, Nina Clark awaited with the latest news updates streaming across the monitors. Celeste glanced at the headlines. Stories of other airlines pledging reforms, governments reconsidering policies, public conversation shifting. The ripple was turning into a wave. She thought back to that moment on Flight 262 when Karen Anderson had torn her ticket. The pain, the disbelief, the fight to reclaim dignity. That moment was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been dismissed or discounted. Celeste closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with renewed resolve. She was ready to lead Liberty Air into a new era, one defined by courage, justice, and respect. She walked toward the window again and watched as the plane ascended, climbing steadily into the sky. A symbol of progress, of rising above old prejudices and soaring toward a future where every passenger and employee knew their worth. Celeste whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." And with that, she turned back to the room full of leaders ready to change the world. Celeste Warren's story is a powerful reminder that dignity is not a privilege reserved for the few, but a right owed to all. Her courage to stand firm against discrimination exposed not only individual cruelty, but a deep-rooted culture that too often remains hidden above the clouds. As we watch the fallout, we are called to confront uncomfortable truths about prejudice in the skies and beyond. This is a call to every passenger, every employee. Every one of us' silence can no longer be the price of safety or acceptance. We must speak out, stand up, and demand respect for all people, regardless of race, status, or appearance. Thank you for witnessing this journey of strength and justice. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can amplify voices that matter and inspire real change. Stay tuned for more stories that challenge injustice and celebrate resilience. Your support helps keep the conversation alive. Because change starts when we refuse to look away.